Hello and welcome to another video tutorial on working with 3D Radar Builder. In this video, I'll be going over the new advanced functions of the 3D Radar Builder system, which you can use to create advanced 3D radars without needing to write a single line of code. Now, you're going to need to have your 3D Radar Builder editor window open. If you don't have it open, then you need to head to Tools, Diamango, and 3D Radar. That will give you your editor window here. Now next, what you're going to need to do is click 3D, then click Create. That will create your 3D radar. Now if you want to just jump right into it and begin tracking something, then let's go ahead and create an empty object here. Let's tag it with the tag enemy. Let's move it out of the way here. Let's move it quite a distance away. Alright, that's good enough. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to go to our blips area here, increase the number of blip types by 1, and rename that object that we just created. We're going to call it the thing to track. So this is the object that we want to track, and it has the tag enemy. So we're going to want to track our enemy and display that as a blip in our 3D radar. So we do that by just opening out the fold out here and then stating that we want to track the objects with the tag enemy. That's it. And do we want it as a sprite, mesh, or a prefab? Previous videos on the 3D Radar Builder cover the mesh settings and the prefab settings. What has changed in version 3.0.1 is the sprite settings and the rotation scale settings, along with the addition of the function which allows you to not only create a world space 3D radar, but also screen space 3D radars. So, continuing here in designing our blip, we're going to want to set the scale to something like 0.15. And we're going to want to go to our tracking lines area, turn that on, and then set a material for the tracking line. We do not have to set a material for the tracking line, however, it's quite handy if we want to give our tracking line a particular look. So we're going to give it the tracking line material here, and then leave the color as is and the scale as is. Then we're going to go to the sprite settings here, and we're going to set our sprite. So we're going to select this particular sprite here, and then select the material. We're going to use the default sprite material. And we're going to leave that. And then next, what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and ensure that we haven't forgotten anything. Okay, so everything's where it should be. And I'm just going to go ahead and run the scene here. Alright, great. We're just going to run the scene, and one more thing that we're going to do is that we're going to change the sprite of this radar here. Now the blip is being displayed, as you can see right there. It's kind of really far, isn't it? We're going to change that at runtime right now. So that scale is really small. So let's go here, rotation and scale, and let's see what scale is best. Let's go to our designs area. And manipulate this scene scale value. Let's reduce it to something else. Alright, so that's fine. Now we're accurately tracking the enemy object in our 3D radar. Now let's go ahead and change this sprite to be something else. Alright, now let's try some of the new scaling functions. So we have the use local scale function here and the link function, which changes based on whether or not you're using local scale or not. If you're using local scale, radar diameter will be hidden and you can scale the radar by using the designs layer itself. Now, if we link these together, then our tracking bounds will scale proportionally with the scale of the designs layer. This gives our blip here more space to move. Now we're gonna go ahead and try to actually break the tracking. So I'm just gonna enter into rotation here. And I'm gonna rotate the radar. And you can actually see that not only does the blip remain in place, but it actually flips to match whether it's upside down or right side up. The blip will always be in the correct position. Alright, since we've shown you how easy it is to create a 3D radar, we're going to go to another scene and show you some of the more advanced functions of the 3D radar system. Now we're going to head to the UI control scene where we'll be showing you the pan functions of the radar system. So I'm just going to check to see if we can go ahead and start using the pan functions here. So these buttons actually control the pan functions of the radar. I'm going to check if I actually set them up correctly here. Alright, so we're going to need to just simply drag in our 3D radar into these sections here, and that will be all. Okay, done. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is simply run the scene and then go ahead and use our pan buttons here to pan around the 3D radar. So I'm going to go ahead and move through the x-axis, move through the z-axis, and also move through the y-axis. Now if we turn on visualize, we can see that certain blips will be called at certain times because we can actually see where they meet the bounds of the radar. Now we can also go ahead and use our inner culling zone here. It will not affect the center object, however it will affect all other blips that enter that zone. As you can see here. Now what I'm going to do is quickly go over these advanced functions. Now for the scale function, which we just covered, and the inner culling zone function, which we just covered, you can actually use that in environment resimulations, especially if you're creating a space simulator where you'd want to have a planet be at the center of your radar. And you wouldn't necessarily want objects to be passing through that point. So if you don't want an object to pass through a certain point, then you can set up that inner culling zone to have only your center object remain at that point or ever be rendered at that point. As for the rotation retargeting, we're going to go ahead and run the scene again and set up a compass. So we want a compass that will always be facing in the correct direction. We want to always know where north is. We always want to know where east and west is, especially if we're in an open world. So you can easily do that without having to write any code by using the rotation targets here. So we increase this by 1, and it currently says rotate nothing. We're going to want this to rotate something. So we're going to go to our 3D radar here. We're going to want to go to designs, then grab our compass and drag it in, freeze the X, Y, and Z rotation, and just drag another object here. Alright, great. Now when we grab our 3D radar and rotate it, our compass now remains where it's supposed to be. However, is affected by position as it should be. Great. Alright. Now I'll be moving to using the screen space function. Actually, I'm going to cover the screen space function in the next scene. So that's it for this particular scene. I'm going to be hopping over into the next scene, which is the exploration scene, and showing you how you can use a screen space 3D radar. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly run this scene here and show you the 3D radar using its screen space system. To turn on this screen space system for your 3D radar, you simply need to toggle this button here. So if we turn that button off, we're no longer using the screen space system. If we turn it on, then we're using the screen space system. So you can see the difference between when it's on and off. Alright. Now, whenever you're using this screen space system, you get 2 extra foldouts. So those foldouts are the camera settings and position settings. Whenever you create a 3D radar, a render camera is also created. This render camera should render your radar, which should be placed on a particular layer. If it's going to be a screen space radar, it needs to be on a layer which the render camera will target. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the radar that I just created. Now, under these camera settings here, we're going to need to indicate what our main camera is, or the camera that the player will be looking at the game through at any time. You can actually change this camera through script at runtime. So if you have multiple cameras in your game and you'll be looking through that particular camera at any one time, but you want to keep your radar rendered, then you can go ahead and set that at runtime. Alright. By default, your camera will be set to whatever the main camera is. However, you can specify the tag which an object with a camera has, and it will use that instead. Or if you select always use main camera, it will search the scene for a game object with a camera component attached to it that has the tag main camera. We're just going to go ahead and leave it at manual camera setup here. Alright, and then next we'll move to the position settings. And as is with the 2D radar builder, you can now do 9-point snapping or choose between manual or snapping. We're currently using the snapping function here, which allows us to do the 9-point snapping. So now we can actually move our radar to the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, top middle, bottom middle, left middle, right middle, or the center of the screen. We can also change the orientation of the radar. I'm going to run the scene to show you this in action. So if we go to the front is function here, which is orientation, and set to east, then when the character walks forward, it will appear as if the objects around him are actually moving to the west. It's quite interesting. So I'm actually not quite sure when I would use this particular function, but it's quite interesting to have. And we've actually learned that persons actually never always use the tool quite the way expected. So we added a bunch of options to it, which you can use to do all sorts of things. So you can pair this with the rotation targeting or rotation retargeting to come up with some unique ways of displaying your components of the 3D radar, like the layers or the blips themselves. All right, so if we go ahead and snap this to the bottom left, you'll notice that the rotation is still as accurate as it was when it was at the bottom center. However, we like to have it at the bottom center here, as it simply just looks better there, because there's no image stretching. So it's going to set it back here. Now, if you go to your camera and you go ahead and change your perspective or your field of view here, it won't affect the radar at all. So that's one thing that we had to ensure. We wanted to keep the radar looking the way it does, regardless of your projection or your field of view. All right. For the blip settings, and I believe that we covered these, the new scaling functions for the blip, which I believe we did cover. Yeah, I believe that we did cover the blip functions. Yeah. So what's here to cover is under positions, positioning, snapping manual. Yeah, padding function. So if we're using the screen space function, we have the option of using the padding function similar to how we use the padding function in the 2D radar. So whether or not you're using the manual or not, you can still position your radar. So just move it over by 10 pixels. It moves 10 pixels. 100 pixels, it moves 100 pixels. Same is true with the y-axis. If we set this to the center here, let's go ahead and drop this down. So the radar at the center here, and let's head up on these stairs here. We're going to want to see the height tracking happening on this 3D radar, which is in screen space. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the gizmos real quickly. And I'm just going to head up this ramp here. And show you the height tracking happening. So these blips here, these player blips, these blue blips are actually using tracking lines. So you can actually see the lines on these blips. So if we head to visualize here, go ahead and find it, zoom in, and then we simply increase our scene scale here. Let's bring in more of these guys. We can clearly see the tracking lines on them. Now, you don't need these. However, that was just the style that we chose for this particular radar. So that covers the new and improved 3D radar builder system. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video when we actually cover the Pro Radar Builder system.